I'm Mike VanBlaricum. I was basically was one that had the idea to start the Ian Fleming Foundation in the first place. That came about by, I had been a James Bond book collector for years, knew the Fleming family, had contacts with Eon Productions, and was selling Bond books. I actually put a catalog called, that was Bondiana. I coined the word Bondiana. And around 1990, a gentleman from Eon Productions called me and said, "Hey Mike, you want a submarine?" And I thought, okay, I'm known as a collector, but that's a little beyond my book collection. So I started thinking about it, decided that maybe a nonprofit foundation where we could preserve the legacy of Ian Fleming and the whole Bond phenomena would be sort of cool. So I contacted Doug Rodinius and John Cork, the two guys that I knew the best, that were the most over-the-top collectors, the way I was, and said, "You guys want to do this?" And I said, the ground rules are, one, it has to be a nonprofit organization. Two is we have to have permission from all the copyright holders, both the Fleming family, at the time it was Glidrose, who owned the copyright, as well as the Fleming family, and Eon Productions. So I contacted Nickel Fleming. He's Peter Fleming's son, and was head of the Fleming estate. And Peter Jensen Smith, who had been Ian Fleming's literary agent from day one, was at the time chairman of Glidrose, who was the literary copyright holders. They liked the idea. In fact, Nickel Fleming's response to me was, "Ian would be amused." And then we contacted Saul Cooper, which eventually led to talking to Michael and Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli. And they, as far as they were concerned, because it was a nonprofit organization, we would not be infringing on anything. They don't like to have money made off their copyright, which I don't like money made off my copyrights either. So I totally understand that. And so we told them we'd keep them in the loop on everything. So we put the nonprofit foundation together, and at the same time, about the same time that happened, and I don't remember the order. Doug Rodinius would know this, remember a lot better. But there was a company by the name of Reed that was putting on car shows, and we had the submarine. We had a line on a bunch of other vehicles, but we had no money, basically. When we bought the submarine, it cost $3,000. It was set in Manhattan at the Intrepid Museum. John and I each put $1,500 in. Doug rented a trailer, went to New York, picked it up, brought it back, and his contribution was restoring it and hauling it back and forth. So we were all pretty much equal partners, and those were donations to the foundation. Again, it was a nonprofit foundation. But as I said, this car company that put on car shows, Reed, wanted to use James Bond as a draw for their car shows. And because we had a line on several vehicles, including the Aston Martin DB5 that was in Florida at the time, and then several vehicles that needed to be restored, we cut a deal with them that we would find those vehicles, they would pay for them and restore them, and then they would revert back to us when the car shows were over. And that worked quite well, because it got us off to, really got us off a kickstart, if you will. So we had the Lotus Esprit, the Toast Sled, the Wet Bike, the For Your Eyes Only Neptune Sub, as well as at the exhibits we had the Bell Rocket Pack and the Aston Martin DB5, among some other costumes and memorabilia that each of us sort of brought too. So those were the early days, and my side of it has always been more toward the literary side. I've always had the contacts with the Fleming family and worked closely with them. At one point, the Fleming family joined the board. They were actually on the board of directors, and that's when Peter Jensen Smith became president. When I stepped down as president in early 2001, late 2000, I think it was early January 2001. It was right before I took over as president of the company that I worked for, and I knew that there's no way I could run things. So I stepped down and sort of off the board. I mean, I was still in name only on the board, but I was busy doing other things in my life, so I wasn't very involved. But Doug kept going very strongly, and today, this is 2010, we now have 34 vehicles and a very good rapport with all of the movie side of the whole effort. And that's pretty much the 20-year history of the foundation. During the 90s, we put out a magazine called GoldenEye, which imitated the Signet book covers, and we also put out a newsletter called Shaken Not Stirred. And we also, we had a presence at a lot of James Bond events through the years. The last time that all the founders and the board were together was at the cocktail party reception the night before the Ian Fleming Centenary exhibit at the Imperial War Museum kicked off, and that was a lot of fun to have everybody together in 2008. One thing that's actually, to me, has been one of the major things the Ian Fleming Foundation actually did is when we started, Ian didn't store its props. Cubby Broccoli once said, "I make movies, not museums." When we asked the Fleming family and Glidrose what they had in their archives, they said, we've got some boxes in the basement, but we don't know what they have. And by pushing and asking questions over the years, now 20 years later, both of those organizations, in Fleming Publications and Ian, have full-time archivists. And they actually are now out buying things back that they had to get into their archives, to keep their archives complete. So in that sense, the foundation has been successful in what it attempted to do from day one, which was to preserve Ian Fleming's legacy, because now the stakeholders, the copyright holders, actually have those archivists and are very interested in telling the history and preserving the history and storing everything, which is in my mind is a very good thing. There's always going to be things out there that we need to keep looking for. There's always things that are fun to find and really uncover the total story of Ian Fleming and his whole legacy. And that's been my bias through the whole thing is why would a man like Ian Fleming, or how and what caused a man like Ian Fleming, who was truly a product of the 20th century, come up with the literary phenomena he did, which changed the way advertising and movies and books and TV and everything in the latter half of the 20th century completely changed as a result of basically one man's idea. And that cultural phenomena is just mind-boggling to me, and I think that's the thing that the foundation will still be pushing toward, trying to completely understand that. Fortunately, as I've said, I certainly think Ian Fleming Publications is very interested in that, and that showed very strongly in the centenary exhibit at the Imperial War Museum in 2008, where they were trying to really show the public the history of that phenomena and what it was about the world that created Fleming, and then the product that Fleming created that changed the world. I think that's pretty interesting and pretty fascinating. I'm pleased with the direction that what I call the movie side of the foundation is doing. I think they've been extremely successful in organizing the troops, if you will, finding vehicles, restoring the vehicles, letting the world know about the vehicles. I think there's probably more things that could be done on the literary side, but those seem to be done, but not as a foundation, more as independent members of the foundation who have their own collections, interfacing with the public. I mean, my personal collection has been used. People have come and sat in the house and dug through my archives in order to write. Well, Andrew Lycett did that in order to write the biography of Fleming. But a lot of other people have come. In fact, I've had Eon Productions call me and send lawyers up and go through my archives to look up things for for various reasons, and I've had them call to ask questions about costs and productions historically, things that we've got. So in a lot of cases on the literary side, the archives are really owned by individuals as opposed to a collection, because they can be, whereas the vehicles are really things that need to be owned, you know, by the public or by a nonprofit organization. And I think that's the difference, and it's why you don't see as much of it. But if there was one central place, I think the individuals would consider loaning parts of their collection. I mean, those kind of things are pretty important, I think.